Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soul Sense Podcast from Samaritan's Well. And today we have a special guest, Lisa Gray. And Lisa is a licensed marriage and family therapist with more than 20 years of experience. She specializes in high conflict couples and relationships, especially impacted by chronic illness and chronic pain. Welcome, Lisa.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So glad
Great
to
to be
have
here.
you on here from the San Francisco, California area.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask first, Lisa. We know you're like me. You've got a lot of experience doing this. You've been doing this for a long time. What first drew you into working with couples and relationships?
When I first started grad school, in my very first class, there was a guy who stood up and introduced himself and he said, "I'm a couples therapist." And I thought, what is your problem? Like, who would want to do that?
A lot of people say that.
Yeah, it was the last thing that I wanted to do.
Right.
But in my internship, my very first client was a couple, and it was a
Okay.
high conflict divorce couple.
Hmm.
And I just felt so alive in those sessions. Like, I was not expecting that.
Wow.
But from the very first couple that I saw, I was so entranced by all of the things going on in the room. And it suits my personality, I think, a little bit more because I'm more of an active therapist.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
I just fell in love with it. And from that moment on, I started putting my hands on everything I could to learn how to do this work well.
I love how you got started because I talk, you probably do too, but I talk to people a lot about what should I be doing? What direction should I be going with my life? And
Uh-huh.
it's like, find out what you're passionate about and find out what you're good at, and then
Right.
just do it over and over.
The interplay of it. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about obviously you had years of counseling experience before you wrote your first book, Healthy Conflict, Happy Couple. But tell
Yeah.
us about some experiences that kind of led towards that book and the concepts in that book, Lisa.
Well, I've always been a reader, so I've always kind of had in the back of my mind that I'd love to write. And I never really, I have kind of like 10 half finished books on my computer, but
Sure,
the whole process was sort of intimidating to me. So
sure.
most of my focus was just helping couples one at a time in my office year after year. But I find myself kind of saying the same things. There's some things that are universal to relationships.
Right.
And so when we went into lockdown with COVID, we all had a little bit more time on our hands, and instead of making sourdough or whatever, I decided to just write down everything that I say on a daily basis to couples,
I
and
love
that
it.
turned into this book. Yeah.
Tell us about some of the concepts. They're obviously, one of the things is couples think, "Oh, if we're having conflict, something is really wrong. This is bad." But
Yeah.
tell us about how you frame it and how you laid it out in your book.
Yeah, well, one of the main points that I'm trying to convey to people, because so many people are afraid of conflict, is
Yeah.
that conflict, if it's done right, if it's healthy, conflict actually increases intimacy in a relationship, right? So if I'm bothered by something you're doing and I'm not telling you, then you're going to know me less and less over time.
Yes.
it
Yes.
We're two different people. So if you really want intimacy with another person, if you really want to know that person deeply, you're going to have conflict with them. So learning how to have healthy conflict that doesn't hurt so much is the answer, not avoiding it. But most of
That
us weren't taught how to have conflict.
we
There was no
weren't.
class in school
Right?
about
We
how to do
weren't.
that.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'll one of the most common things I'll do when I'm first meeting couples or individuals is tell me about how conflict was handled in your home. And the
Absolutely.
most common thing, of course, is either burying it and just brushing it under the rug
Yeah.
or blow ups, right?
Right. Or one
And
followed by the other. Right. Yeah.
yes, yes, bury, bury,
Yeah.
blow up, bury, bury,
Yeah.
blow. That's true.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you look at that and you could see why people might either be, avoiding it or, like a couple I saw recently in his home, it was like we get angry, we get it out, and we put it all out there on the table, even though we might be kind of mad, lose our
Yeah.
temper and stuff. And in her house, it was like anger was a 4-letter word. We do
Yeah.
not get angry. And so
Right.
you can imagine they have some
Yeah.
challenges,
Hmm.
right? He
Yeah.
has to kind of come down so he doesn't
Yeah.
scare her off. And
Hmm.
she has to find that courage, right, to say
Right.
something. What are
Yeah.
some of the principles that, you could teach us about that?
So, one of if people ask me, what is the one thing that you would tell couples? If I could only tell people one thing, I would say
Yep.
stop fighting when you're already mad. Because most couples, that's the only time that they're talking about the
Hmm.
problem is when they're already mad. I mean, why would they ruin a perfectly good Saturday morning when everything's going fine talking about their problems, right? So they
Right.
wait until the thing happens and then they're trying to solve it, but they're already mad. They're already elevated. They're already in fight or flight or whatever. So I'm sure you've had this experience. So many couples come in and they say, we have been arguing about the same thing for 10 years and we've
Yes.
never made any progress. And my question is always, how many times have you talked about it when you're not already mad? And the answer is never. You know what I
Like
mean?
zero.
So, yeah. So, I mean, it's part of the reason why couples therapy actually works because you're setting aside a time when you're not already mad to sit down and reasonably talk about something.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the first step, and I have like a 3-step process for conflict. And the first step is the setup, which is to say something like, hey, I'd like to talk about our finances. I know we disagree. What's a good time for you? And to sort of like set a place and a time to talk about that when you're not already in the middle of an argument about it. And that's going to go much better than when you're trying to solve it when you're really mad that your partner just spent money on
I
something.
think we should tell couples, don't fight when you're mad, just like you don't drive when you're drunk.
Totally. Exactly. You make a plan. You give your keys to
Yep.
somebody before you start, so
Right. And
so
we know physiologically when you're flooded, that
yep.
heart rate jumps from 70 to 105,
Right.
and all
Yep.
of a sudden, you're not thinking clearly.
No,
Not a good time to work
right.
something out.
Yeah. You have literally like lost contact with the creative problem solving part of your brain. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's
So
shut
there's
down,
no
right?
possibility.
Because
Yeah.
you're yeah, you've
Yeah.
shut down that part that really is able to work out problems. Okay,
Yeah.
so the setup invitation
Yes.
is the way to kind of humbly try to bring your partner into something. What's the
Right.
second step?
So, in my experience, I feel like couples move way too fast to trying to solve the problem
Like
before they
fix it.
really, yeah, before they really understand each other. Right. So,
Mhm.
if we're going into an argument, I already know what I want my solution to be, and you probably do too. And
Right.
that's now we're in a power struggle because that's only two solutions. Right. So, I break up that conversation into two different conversations. So the second step is a listening conversation where
Okay.
you're just listening to understand. So it's kind of like a speaker listener kind of like really trying to grasp what your partner's position is, why they feel that way, all those things. And then that's it. That's the end of the conversation. No problem solving at all. And then
I like
the
it.
third step is a whole different conversation where now that you've understood your partner, you really understand where they're at, where you're at. You can come into this next conversation. I make my couples come in with 5 different possible solutions. And then
Ooh,
we
I
can
like
have
that.
then we can have a problem solving conversation that is more creative because now we understand each other better, you know?
I like that. I like
Hmm.
that. And on like all of those, are those like three separate time periods? The setup
Yes.
invitation would be early. Now we're
Yep.
going to listen to understand. And then a
Hmm.
third time is going to be this different conversation where we both bring some possible solutions.
Exactly. Yeah. And we kind of just talk through the pros and cons of each possible solution and maybe blend some of them together, whatever. But it's so much easier to come up with a solution when you've heard your partner fully, which if you move straight to solutions, you're never going to really understand
Yeah.
what the issue is,
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so tempting to move to solutions if you don't separate out those conversations. So over time, you can put those two conversations back together when you get really good at the process. But at the beginning, I like to separate them out into two completely different conversations.
Well, apparently God agrees with you because James 1, it says, be quick to hear and slow to speak.
Absolutely. Right.
So the quick
Exactly.
to hear, and it's listed first, it seems like that's the first thing that has to happen.
Yeah. I mean, how can you solve a problem with anyone if you haven't heard them, thoroughly?
Yeah. And when you're
You can't.
mad and flooded, I can tell you from a whole lot of experience, you just don't listen well,
You can't. Yeah, you really can't.
right? You
Yeah.
just can't. I mean, physiologically, you can't reason well. You're
Mhm.
just it's payback, it's revenge, it's
Mhm.
elevation, etc.
Yeah.
And so I really like that this focus is we're going to emphasize listening even more than speaking.
Yes. Yeah. It's almost like the problems can sometimes solve themselves if you spend
Mhm.
enough time listening to each other. It's just that most people have never done that, right? Because they're either doing it when they're flooded or they're going straight to their solution. And that whole listening step gets completely skipped,
I
So it's
really
really the most important part.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And one of the things I've heard over and over from a business model is the best leaders are really good listeners to the people that, they're leading. But then also what you'll find is, okay, I hear the problem A, B, C, D, E. Now tell me a solution. Give me two options for solutions. They want to hear that. And most of
Mhm.
those people in that organization, they're trained to think that way. That,
Mhm.
okay, he's going to listen, but I'm going to need to come with some possible solutions too. And do you
Right.
find that your couples over time kind of get into that habit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you're not going to be very forthright with solutions or ideas if your partner or your boss or whoever isn't even listening to you. You feel
No.
disrespected.
Right.
But most of us do have good ideas. Like
Right.
most of us can be really creative, but we have to be
Mhm.
respected and listened to first and know that that person is going to hold our solution ideas with, tenderness and respect. And so, if you create that kind of culture in a business or a relationship, then yeah, the ideas and creativity are going to flow much better.
And I think there's integrity and validation when the couple is listening to each other. There's really a wound to integrity and validation when it's not happening. And it's a
Yes.
severe wound. It
Yeah,
really is.
it really is. It's so painful.
What else would you tell us about healthy conflict, happy couple that would be significant? Because I really want to talk about this second book and something you really, you know, that's a lot of what you focus on. But tell us anything else that you'd like to about healthy conflict, happy couple. I love our three steps.
Yeah, I think just going back to what we kind of briefly touched on, which is like be kind to yourself. You didn't learn how to do conflict. Nobody taught you how to do that.
Yeah,
The only class you ever had was watching your parents, and for most of us that wasn't the way we wanted to do it, but we didn't know how else to do it. So
right.
it's like, you can learn this. It's a skill like any other skill. So don't be afraid. I have a lot of compassion for people that are conflict avoidant because usually that's a reasonable response to very painful conflict that they've had.
Yes.
And so it's like my message is sort of don't be afraid. You can learn this. It's a skill. Just practice, learn the steps, practice. You can do it. And things will be so much better if you
It's
do.
so good. It's so good. You do have to face the fear, though, right? You
Yeah.
have to
Yep.
face the fear. You have to move towards it instead of away from it. One of the things I
Exactly.
do in the most severe cases is I'll do some trauma work with that husband or wife where, dad used to rage or mom used to throw things or whatever, dramatic thing might have happened. And I find that if we can get some trauma resolution and some peace at the
Yeah.
foundation, it makes it so much easier today to go ahead
Hmm.
and go, okay, I think I could do it. It's a little hard at first because you're establishing a new habit. But
Yeah.
once they see they can do this, it's like a whole new realm for couples.
Oh, it is. Yeah. And sometimes you also have to teach like just basic body regulation skills, how to manage your own physiology when you
Right.
start to get activated. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Because you can't leave the responsibility on your partner to self-soothe you. You're going to
Right.
have to work that out yourself. And that can
Yeah.
take some time. It's okay.
Yeah.
And you want to
Yeah.
be kind to yourself about that. Tell us about how chronic illness entering a relationship brings some unique challenges. And how did you get into that area specifically? Because that's a very specific niche.
It really is. So after I had my second child in 2005, I just felt like I couldn't recover. I knew that something was wrong with
Okay.
me, but the problem with chronic illnesses is a lot of the symptoms are often vague, like I'm exhausted. So
Yeah.
is everyone. My joints hurt. Welcome to
Right.
middle age,
Right.
whatever.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
so for years, most chronic illness patients for years are told everything's fine, your labs are normal, nothing's wrong with you or whatever. So it took me about 5 or 6 years before I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I finally
Oh,
got a diagnosis of a chronic illness myself. And it's just interesting how God works, because as soon as that happened, all of a sudden, all these couples started coming to me that where the chronic illness was a component. It's like
what do you
now
know?
now I have this lived experience. Now I can,
Right.
like you're bringing this to me so that I can like help other people with it. And so all of a sudden, it just started to become a component of a lot of my clients. And the interesting thing about chronic illness is that depending on the severity, pretty much everything has to be renegotiated. So
Okay.
you've had like a way of living, like maybe household roles or, you know, who's the type of work that you do or whatever it is. And now so many of those things have to be renegotiated. It's really a grieving process because
Yes, it
the
is.
life you thought you were building is now not the life you're living for both people, not just the
Yes.
person who's sick. Yeah.
Hmm. I think that's such a key component that I think people miss is that when you've got this debilitating disease, and I suppose it's real similar to if there was, a terrible car wreck or,
Mhm.
just a terrible physical disability that suddenly you have,
Yeah.
that you do have to grieve and you can't hurry through that,
No.
but you need to have an awareness of that need to do that.
Hmm.
I remember a man that I worked with decades ago, and he had been in a terrible accident, and one of those that you go to the hospital for like 9 straight months or something. It was
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah.
And he said the first few months he and his wife were just really grieving, and honestly both of them were really feeling sorry for themselves.
Hmm.
But he said he had told me earlier there was a turning point in that stay. And I said, "What was the turning point?" He said, "It's interesting. And I don't know which one of us it was," which I usually assume that must be his wife, because if he had done it, he'd probably remember. But he said one of us came up with the idea, what if instead of focusing, we've been doing this for about 8 months, what if instead of focusing on what we've lost, we start focusing on what is here right
Hmm.
now? And so
Yes.
they would just start celebrating, picking up the fork or
Hmm.
taking a drink of water
Yeah.
or, the first step on the walker or whatever. He said that really turned things around. Is that
Absolutely.
part of how do you help couples with the grief or trying to turn things eventually
Hmm.
from woe is me? Because I know there's a lot of temptation for self-pity. There
There
would
is.
be for any of us,
Hmm.
right?
And
But
it's
tell us a little bit
reasonable.
about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I think, like, yes, it's a grieving process, but sometimes partners are grieving different things and sometimes
Okay.
they're in different like stages. So, like, this couple sounds like they were kind of aligned, but sometimes one partner's like, let's find a cure, let's do the thing. And the other partner's
Sure.
depressed, or one partner's really angry and the other partner's, given up or whatever. So, that's what makes it so challenging with couples is that both people are grieving and people don't grieve the same.
No.
um, So, yeah, so for the book that I wrote, I think one day I was walking along, I was thinking about the stages of grief, which,
Uh-huh.
we all understand are not really stages, right?
No, they're like a
There's nothing,
swirl.
yeah, there's nothing organized about them. It's not like you
Yeah,
go
there's a
through them at
swirl.
some organized way, but they represent emotional experiences that I think everyone who has grieved can recognize.
Right.
And I was thinking about how there's like 5 or 6 of those stages, and I operate mostly from an acceptance and commitment therapy perspective.
Okay.
That's ACT, and so ACT also has 5 or 6 basic core skills. And I was
Okay.
thinking, oh, what if we could weave those together somehow? So for example, to the example that you were giving, the
Uh-huh.
first sort of stage of grief, right, is shock or denial. And the ACT skill that I paired with that would be present moment awareness, which is what this
Okay.
couple did, right? It's
Okay,
like
sure.
letting go of all of the things you used to have and be and all of that, and just being able to be in contact with what's happening in the present moment. You're here
Right at
now.
this moment.
Yeah. I don't know where you'll get to. I don't know where you've been, but here's where you are right now. And this is what you have, whatever you have right now. And so that present moment awareness, I think, can really shift things for people, when they can stop clinging to the past or the, desperate hope for something to change, and just be where they are and know that there's still, there still can be good things happening
There's
right
still
now.
life for you. It certainly looks different than maybe it did 6 months or 6 years ago,
Yep.
but there's life at the moment, and we know one of the great scriptural, um, truths is grace to help in time of need.
Right. And that's not tomorrow's time of need, or
No,
it's just right now.
it's
Yeah.
this moment. Okay.
Yeah.
I love the
Mhm.
present moment awareness. What are some
Mhm.
other things maybe connected to the ACT and grieving that you've found helps?
So there's a couple really important ones. One of them, so I paired with anger, I paired like cognitive diffusion, which is kind of a complicated word, but really all it means is to unhook yourself from your thoughts, right? So if you have a thought, for example, if you have the thought, I never feel good, right,
Right.
then you and never feeling good are fused together, and there's
Mhm.
no way to get out
Connected,
of
yeah.
that, right? But if you can say, like, oh, I notice I'm having the thought that I never feel good, even just that one step away can help you analyze and kind of assess, is that really true? Like, actually, there's parts of me that feel fine right now. You know,
Good.
there's days when I feel much better than others. And so you can sort of get a little distance from your thoughts and be able to not kind of be your thoughts. And that's especially helpful with anger,
I
because
like
there's
that.
so much to be angry at when you have chronic
Yes.
illness,
Oh my
you know?
goodness,
Yeah.
absolutely, because, I call that teach clients that's like the director's chair technique.
Mhm.
It's like you
Yeah.
go from acting in the play to being in the director's chair and say, "Okay, what's going on here? You
Mhm.
just said I never feel good, etc."
Right.
And is that is that 100%? Is that completely true?
Right.
And sometimes you can make a statement or have a strong thought, and
Mhm.
another way of kind of uh, coming into this neutral place is saying, Lord, do you agree that I never have a good day? Do
Mhm.
you agree with this? And you just kind of
Yeah.
hold it up to the Lord. But all of
Absolutely.
those are real similar things. I like those, Lisa.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then, the step with bargaining. So, bargaining with chronic illness is sort of like either going into the past, like, I wish I hadn't climbed up on that ladder, or,
Oh, yeah,
I wish I
yeah.
hadn't eaten so many cheeseburgers, or whatever it is, or
Right.
looking into the future, like, I want to try this, I want to try that, and chasing like every bizarre little thing that your sister's,
Right.
friend's husband
Yeah,
did, or
yeah.
whatever.
Right, right.
And you can spend a lot of money and a lot of time
Mm.
chasing all these things. And so the ACT skill that I paired with that is finding your values, which I think for
Okay.
Christians is a little bit easier, because we already sort of assess our values on a regular
Sure.
basis.
Sure.
But the idea being that when you get sick, you may have to change your goals and your activities, but you don't have to change your values.
Oh,
So
that's good.
yeah. So for instance, let's say, like the example I give in the book is a woman who her value is like helping inner city children, and she teaches them cooking classes and is
Hmm.
really there for them. So she gets sick and she can't do that anymore, but she can still honor that value. She may not be able to do that activity. And so now, she makes YouTube videos on days that she's feeling good, cooking YouTube videos, and shares them with those same kids, right? And so I think that when couples experience chronic illness, stepping back and assessing, like, what is our values as a couple? What are
Hmm.
our values individually? And how can we still honor those values, even though we can't do the same things that we did before? Because now you're still living a life of integrity and purpose and meaning. It just looks a little different than it did before.
Right. I like that, Lisa. I think that's such a good perspective. And tell me, I know this has got to be a big area. We touched on it just a little, but in these couples where one of them has something very chronic or very, it's long lasting, right?
Mhm.
At least the way it looks today. Um, eh, uh, tell us about how you work with them when they're offended with God for not healing me or giving it to me in the first place, or offended with each other.
Mhm. Well, I think being offended or resentful towards God when you get a chronic illness is a natural part of the grieving
Yeah,
process.
I do
And
too.
God can handle that. Like,
Yep.
so don't stop communicating with him. Again, now you're in a conflict with God, and it's like, approach that conflict. Don't just deny that it's happening. Right. And so again,
You might need to
you can.
schedule a time to talk about it.
Totally. So, I'm encouraging them to just feel those feelings and express those feelings and work through those feelings and not just try to bury them because you shouldn't be feeling that way.
Mhm,
Um, so, like, being offended or mad that things have changed, that's totally normal. I think resentment is a little bit different. Resentment
mhm.
is not a feeling that happens to you, it's something that you nurture, and you don't have to nurture that. Right.
Yeah.
So kind of the momentary feelings that come up if you're mad that you have to do all the vacuuming because your partner can't do that anymore or whatever, that's
Mhm,
totally
mhm.
normal. We can talk about that. But again, you're here now. There's nothing we can't change the. So I kind of sometimes I talk about the chronic illness as like a third person in your relationship, like
Okay,
externalizing the chronic illness. It's not
okay.
your fault. It's not my fault. It's this thing that has happened to us, so we can be united as a team against this problem that we have. Um, Kind of just like you would do with any other problem, but that's sometimes really helpful to kind of defray the resentment or anger about it.
I like that. And, you know, anything that a couple can join together in facing, right?
Hmm.
Oh,
Yep.
well, we've gotta raise these kids. We're gonna have to discipline our three-year-old
Yep.
different than our five-year-old. If you can come together and have some unity, right? It doesn't need to divide you.
No.
It can bring you
Yeah.
closer,
Right.
but you're gonna have to have some of those conversations you talked about earlier, right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So we're a team, but we do have this problem. So let's continue to talk about it and negotiate how we're going to make these changes that need to be made. You know.
Um, do you have a lot of times where the person that's ill, whether it's the husband or the wife, um, where they feel so guilty that so much has been left on their spouse? How do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah. There's plenty of guilt to go around in this
Yeah,
situation. So,
I bet there
the
is.
person who's ill often feels guilty that they can't do anything that they
Yeah.
used to be able to do. They can't help their partner. They also, though, feel angry that their partner can still do all those things, right? So a lot of times
Oh,
there's a lack of compassion there too. Like,
okay.
what's your problem? You can still do all the
You can
things.
still
Like,
vacuum and clean
yeah,
and whatever, and I
why are
can't
you
get out of
mad?
this bed or
Yeah,
whatever.
like I'd love to vacuum, right? So
Yeah.
so there's a whole host of feelings there. Now on the caregiver's part, there's a lot of guilt when they go out to do things to take care of themselves. So like they used to play tennis with their partner, now they got to play tennis with their friend, but that's taking them away from their, caregiving their partner. They have a lot of guilt about that. And
Okay.
yet it's very important that they take care of themselves because that's what's going to give them longevity in being able to care for their partner, you know.
Oh,
So
that's
so
good.
they have sometimes anger because their partner's not pulling their weight or whatever. And they also have guilt when they try to take care of themselves appropriately. So there's a lot of anger and guilt swirling around there. And part of the solution is just to bring that out into the open. And
Hmm.
again, hear each other, understand that these are normal feelings for both people to have. We respect those feelings and we can still kind of negotiate and solve these problems.
Lisa, do you try, as we're bringing that guilt to the surface, do you try to differentiate or help them differentiate between what we would call false guilt versus real guilt?
I do. Yeah. I always
Could you
say,
talk about that for a
guilt,
minute? Because I think
yeah.
that's so important for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say, guilt is a positive emotion. So
Right.
it's like if I steal something and I feel guilty, that's good. You
You
know,
don't want to
that
not feel guilty about that.
right. Like that is what leads me to repentance. Like if I never felt guilty, I would never seek
Yes.
repentance. So guilt
Yes.
is a good thing, but it's meant to be temporary. It's like you're supposed to feel it and then correct the situation and then you can let go of guilt. So
Uh-huh.
that's healthy guilt.
Right.
Toxic guilt is when you feel guilty about something when you haven't done something wrong. So I always ask my clients, when you feel a feeling of guilt, ask yourself, have I done something wrong? If so, then you need to repent, correct, whatever. But if
Yeah.
not,
Ask for
then
forgiveness.
yeah. If you haven't done something wrong, then guilt is not the correct emotion for that experience. So you can feel the guilt, but also logically understand that that's not actually the correct emotion being assigned to that situation. So if I'm chronically ill and I can't do household duties, I'm not doing something wrong. Like I don't have any option there. So guilt
Yes.
isn't actually the right emotion for that. I can have compassion towards my partner.
Hmm.
I can
Hmm.
work towards helping figure out what we're going to do about that, but I needn't feel guilty about something that I haven't done something wrong.
That's good, Lisa. Would you say, is this a close parallel? Toxic guilt is like shame or condemnation,
Yeah. I always
right?
say it's like carrying your kitchen garbage around. Like what good does it do anyone? Right?
Oh,
It
that's
doesn't.
good. That's good.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'll boil it down and say, okay, conviction, I feel guilt about something, says I did bad. The toxic or the shame says I am bad,
Right. Yeah.
right?
And that's just
And I
not
just
true. Yeah.
I just thought of something, Lisa, that the parallel between guilt is meant to be a temporary emotion.
Mhm.
Anger, I think, is meant to be a temporary emotion.
Right. It's an
So if I
alert.
hold on to anger day after day, it turns into resentment, or we could say toxic anger. The Bible
Exactly.
says a root of bitterness will defile many.
Mhm.
And if we hold on to guilt, it becomes toxic guilt. It goes from just a that momentary conviction, oh, that was wrong. I need to ask forgiveness or confess or, accept God's
Yeah.
forgiveness or forgive myself. And of course, do something different. Okay, running
Yeah.
that stop sign was not the best idea. Plus, I got a $300 fine. I think
Right.
I've got reasons to not do that again, right? So I feel
Yep.
conviction about it. I
Yeah.
tell people when we talk about, and I think that it's going to be similar for guilt now that I think about it,
Mhm.
but I tell people anger is like manna. It can feed you on the day that you gather it, but if you keep it overnight, it gets worms.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I feel like if you never got angry, you wouldn't have any boundaries. I mean, you would never know that someone's crossing a line for
No,
you. So
I'm convinced God gave us the gift of anger as a reaction to a perceived injustice. Somebody
absolutely.
said nothing ever changed until somebody gets angry, you know?
That's right.
But
Yes.
guilt, I suppose, it's more like, "Oh, I'm a little angry with myself for doing that because I don't think that was good." Right?
And
But
that
if you
creates
stay
change.
angry, yes, and it should
Mhm.
go towards change. which is what anger in a relationship should do.
Mhm.
Hey, I really don't like ABC.
Right.
Maybe could we talk about that tomorrow?
Mhm.
Or something like that.
Exactly, exactly.
Um,
Right.
but tell us more. Is the what are some of the other key parts of working with someone that's got a chronic illness of some kind? You've told us about several fascinating parts, but what are
Mhm.
some other pieces or parts of it, Lisa?
Well, I think like for couples, it really comes down to empathy going in both directions,
Okay.
and then way more communication than you thought you'd ever have to have about everything. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So
Okay.
like for example, if we talk about household duties, most couples have never negotiated that. You know,
No.
like you get together and you kind of just like fall into habits, whether they're just like, societal role habits or whatever you're good at, or I don't know. But most people have never actually sat down and been like, okay, who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? What are we going to, so now you're going to have to talk about that,
Right.
and similarly, most couples haven't really done a lot of talking about intimacy. They just like got into certain habits, and and now that's going to change, and you're going to
Right.
actually have to sit down and talk about that and negotiate that. So there's going to be a lot more communication about every single thing that used to just come naturally or fall into place, or you know yeah.
So it kind of, in one sense, accepting that challenge to have a lot more empathy and a lot more communication is a big part of this.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It crosses through every stage and every step and every feeling, right? Is this the solution to almost everything is to communicate more about it and have more empathy about it. And so, that's gonna weave through whatever stage or feeling you're having. That's the answer.
Then I'm thinking, Lisa, some of these couples that you've worked with more long term and they've really embraced this empathy and communication,
Mhm.
those must be some of the most beautiful relationships you've worked with eventually.
Yeah, it's ironic because I think that when people have these kind of challenges, the opportunity to have such an intimate relationship exists. Whereas
Wow.
if you haven't really faced a lot of challenges, you haven't needed to communicate about any of this
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, things might be
Yeah.
going fine, but there's not a depth there. You can achieve such a depth to your relationship when you're required to really take the time to sit down and communicate and empathize and all of those things. And so, like, for example, I have a client who's paralyzed. He's in a wheelchair. His wife is a full time caregiver. I mean, their relationship's one of the most beautiful relationships I've ever seen,
Oh,
you know?
I can
So,
imagine that.
so yes, they don't have like a lot of the privileges that healthy people have to go, to Disneyland or whatever,
Yeah.
but that doesn't matter. They have a gorgeous, lovely relationship with one another. So, I mean, I'm,
That's just
I
an
wouldn't wish it on
incredible
anyone, but
testimony.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I get it. I get it. Well,
Mhm.
there's an old saying that I've always liked: necessity is the mother of invention.
Isn't
And,
it though? Yeah.
that's how we invent things. But, you look at these couples, it becomes very necessary for
Mhm.
empathy to go way up and communication to go way up.
Yeah.
And of course, what goes with that? Humility and
Mhm.
love.
Yeah,
And I like to tell
absolutely.
people there is no marriage problem that can't be solved with humility and love,
That is the truth, right? Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you emphasize this area, and your book is Thriving in a Relationship When You Have Chronic Illness. And I'm sure that word thriving, you probably wrestled a little bit about what
We
to put
did.
in there, right? Because
Mhm.
some people are going to go, what does she mean thriving? This is a terrible thing or whatever. But
Exactly. We
you
had
just kind of described how people
Mhm.
can thrive
Right. Yeah.
even though they're going through something really difficult.
Yeah. The chronic illness community has quite a visceral reaction to that word in a negative way.
Yep,
And my publisher and I, we had long conversations about whether or not to use that word. But
I
it
can
was really
imagine.
important to me because of this same thing that we've been talking about, that you don't have to accept less because you have a chronic illness. You're not doomed to just like, you know, chugging along in a relationship when you have a chronic illness. Like you can still thrive. And I'm
Yes,
really committed to that idea. I understand it's not going to look like it did before. I get that, but I disagree that you can't still thrive. So
I
like one of the
totally agree with you, Lisa.
yeah, one of the
Well, I'm sorry,
metaphors I
what were you
use
going to
is
say?
like I was one of the metaphors that I often use, and this is sort of the act skill for depression, is like if you
Uh-huh.
imagine that you are like the sky, your chronic illness is like the weather, you know? So it's
Okay.
like yeah, that sometimes the weather's really bad, sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's good or whatever. Like you are so far above that experience and you are still that. Like clouds can't hurt the sky, you know? And so
That's so good.
that's what I mean by thriving is like you are still you outside of whatever experiences you're having and you don't have to give that up.
I love that. Well, Lisa, I mean, you could use a great parallel, I guess, analogy. Look at people in the world. You can thrive, of course, in Hawaii with perfect weather, but you
Mhm.
can thrive in igloos, apparently. You can
Yeah.
thrive where there's terrible storms or rain
Mhm.
8 out of
Yeah.
12 months. People
Mhm.
thrive in all of those, but you have to learn how to overcome it.
Right. I mean, some of the happiest countries in the world scientifically are these cold, you know,
That's
wintry countries.
true.
So yeah,
That's true. They've had to
yeah,
learn how to overcome it. They've had to
yeah,
learn how to overcome it.
yep.
What are Lisa? What are some kind of final thoughts that you might have that you'd like our listeners to have? In going away. This has been wonderful.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would just kind of reiterate some of the things that I've said, which is like learn how to do conflict. I mean, at the last year that we have statistics for is 2023, and 194 million Americans had at least one chronic condition. So
I didn't
learning
know.
conflict, yeah, it's well over a third of the population, and that
Hmm.
number doesn't include
Hmm.
children. So learning the basics of conflict, you don't know what's coming in your life. I mean, it might not be a chronic illness, but like
Right.
things are going to happen. And so
Right.
learn the basics of conflict so that you have those skills embedded. And then when something happens, whether it's chronic illness or grief or anything else, empathy, compassion, more communication, and following those steps that you've learned, I think is going to serve you well as a couple.
That's so good. I couldn't help but think as you were talking about this about thriving because I'm so happy you chose that word.
Hmm.
Johnny Erickson Tata. I'm sure you're
Yes.
familiar with her.
Yeah,
She's
love her.
18. She has this, kind of a just a incredible blessed life, and then
Mhm.
she dives into some shallow water, breaks her neck. Rest of her life, she's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And it did take her time, even with the great support of her friends and family,
Yeah.
to overcome her offense with God and to grieve and to get to
Mhm.
acceptance. But I want to tell you from everything I know about after she got through that initial shock,
Mhm.
she has so thrived in her life.
Yeah.
And she reports a very happy marriage.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's a beautiful testimony of being able to overcome. But of course, us caregivers and family and friends, if we're not in that place of Johnny, we have to keep in mind we need to have compassion, help them grieve, especially
Mhm.
initially, because we
Yeah.
can't just get them to, oh, be happy the next day. No, there's some tears to cry and some grieving, and we have to respect that too, don't we?
Right. Like thriving is not about toxic positivity.
Yes, that's
There's a
good.
process, and even where she is now, I'm sure she has days where she doesn't feel like she's thriving. You know what I mean? Like all of us have the
Well, we
ups and
all
downs
would.
of life.
Yeah,
So it's a process, but hopefully that could be like kind of an end result where you can land.
that's good. Lisa, thank you so much for being on. We're going to list your books. You've got two really good books, The Healthy Conflict, Happy Couple, and then the Thriving book related to chronic illness. Anything else that we should know? If there's a website or any way to connect with you, Lisa, we're so thankful for you being on today.
Yeah. Well, my website is just lisagraymft.com. And
Okay.
then that's also my Instagram handle, Lisa Gray MFT. Um, yeah. So you can find me in both of those places.
Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciated the conversation.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please do us a favor and like, subscribe, and share with others who might need it. And you can find additional resources at SamaritansWell.com.